Hi, welcome back, everyone. If you take your seats. Thank you. Welcome to the session 2 today. It's Dramaturgy in Action, Practical Realities. My name is Robin Loon. I'm from Center 42. I will be moderating today's session. Now, essentially today is we're very happy to have 6 dramaturgs sharing with us their experiences. Yes, they are anecdotal, but from there we could draw larger implications and ideas of what it means to actually be in practice. Yeah. So how we will operate today is I will invite respective speakers to do a very quick run-through of one specific case study, and then we'll open it up to the floor. So each speaker will have between 10 to 12 minutes to do. So if you have this with you, please refer to it. In the interest of time, I won't introduce them one at a time, so please refer to this. I'm just going to go straight on and start with founding director of the ADN, Mr. Lim How Ngean. Yeah. Yes. And he will tell us about his experience.
Sorry, technically I'm not ready yet.
Oh, technically you're not ready?
Oh, okay, it's fine. I'll just plug myself in. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. Plugging in sound, I was told to. Right. Okay, hi. We all have about 20 minutes each, or?
12.
12.
12, 15.
Right, better. Sorry, I thought it was 20. Right, very quickly, I just want to relate an experience, a case, or rather a project or two if we have time, about my experience, or rather the kind of interesting working relationship I've developed with certain choreographers. The one I'm referring to for this session would be Pichit Klanchun, contemporary Thai choreographer. I was privileged to work with him in 2011 on a project that was spearheaded by Esplanade, actually. They wanted to commission Pichit to do a new piece of work. And I was engaged on board. The work finally was called Black and White. The way that it happened was quite interesting, as I was telling some of you this morning. The way that Esplanade operates in terms of new commissions for their dance festival is that when they have these commissions, they would always encourage, suggest, recommend a dramaturg to work in tandem with the choreographer. This is by no means forced. The choreographer is free to choose whomever she prefers, but Esplanade always also wanted to have sort of a quote-unquote backup plan to suggest someone who could work with the said choreographer. It so happened that Pichit was open to working with anyone, and I think Esplanade then went along to recommend me, and we had a chat. It was a very long talk, actually. And then from there, the relationship, or the working relationship, grew. It was a very new experience to me. It was actually one of the first where there was, in a way, an institution who was overseeing the project, and therefore there were some deadlines that we had to manage, meaning they were definitely already premiere dates, they were locked in, and it was transnational for the simple reason that at that time I was based in Singapore. There was Pichit and his dance company in Bangkok, but we were all in different spaces, so to speak, because I was at that time just starting out my PhD, and it just, luck would have it that I was actually researching on contemporary Southeast Asian dance, and then sort of it went into looking at Pichit's work. What I want to bring to the table from my experience is, this morning we talked about certain concepts and definitions of what a dramaturg could be, should be, would be in the context of Asia or beyond, or even globally. But specifically, my relationship with the choreographer was I would say what Heli Minati this morning called pengganggu, the disturber, the provocateur, the interrupter. At that time, my understanding of dramaturgy was actually at a very rudimentary level. I was also learning on the job, but what had equipped me was a certain set of skills. Biggest skill I brought to the table was to ask questions. This is something that I think you cannot run away as dramaturg, whether you're doing dance or theater. But my working relationship with Pichet was something that I entered into thinking, or rather getting excited with the most conventional idea of what a dramaturg was. I remember going for the first meeting and anticipating that I could ask, so what kind of research would you like me to do, in the most earnest way? And to the choreographer's credit, Pichet is very well read. He is very, very intellectual in the sense that he reads a lot before even going or embarking on a project. And he would confidently say to me, I think I've done enough research. I don't really need research from you. And I remember at that time thinking, oh wow, that's easy, there goes my job. That was far from the truth actually, because later on I discovered that the role again, this role, the pengganggu, the provocateur, the disturber, became more and more real as rehearsals developed. I essentially acted as sounding board in its most easy way or a summary of what I've been doing with him. And I realized that that was actually quite an important skill to develop as a dramaturg. Not just being able to research, but as I think was pointed out by someone this morning, Charlene said, to watch. Number one, the idea of being an observer. The observer is one that is informed, actually. You come in with some experience of performance, and yes, from where I came from, there was an idea of the theoretical frameworks of performance and dance. But more importantly, I came bringing with me experience of observing. And I think it was Susan Melrose who talked about the informed observer, the critical observer, where you go in there to see something where there is also a lot of intuitive thinking involved, intuitive feeling of how to go about critically assessing what you are watching, from rehearsal to process, from process to rehearsal to performance. That's one. Number two, from the observation then came, for me, the critical questioning. In this region, there is still, I think, a lot to be said about criticality, critique, and criticism. That is something that I think quite a few of us have encountered, especially working on the floor, working in studios as dramaturgs, where there seems to be a fine line between being critical and having to critique. People always think that when you make a comment or you critique something, you are being critical. And then the whole idea of taking on something personally comes really involved. But with Pichet, I was lucky again. He was really professional about it. So the whole idea of then taking on critique came on board, where there was really very much engagement from his side in a healthy debate on almost all things. So what happens when you do not have research? I thought that was the be-all and end-all. And then, of course, there were many conversations that developed, debates, discussions, heated discussions in a good way, constructive, heated discussions, and more questions that led to even more discussions. Pichet was actually on a journey of looking at developing a particular choreographic style, a choreographic style that he had wanted to develop from his classical training. And it was a particular style that was entrenched in the classical Thai tradition, Khon. I'm just going to play this video. And so what happened was that then came the question of what is a Malaysian-born, Singapore-based dramaturg doing in a contemporary Thai dance project. Lots of disconnect was happening. But at the same time, as I was doing my research into my PhD, there was some fundamental research that I had to do. One being that since I'm looking at certain Southeast Asian contemporary forms, most of the Southeast Asian contemporary dance forms are rooted in certain tradition and classical styles. And since there was a sort of a synergy in looking at Pichet's work, I had already begun doing my own research into Thai Khon, which is classical performance that actually encapsulates dance, drama, and song. So the other thing that I brought to the table was that I had to equip myself with some sort of cultural literacy. And this again, I'm reminded of what we were talking about this morning in terms of cultural mediation. Or rather, I had to try to then unpack what Pichet was approaching in his development of this contemporary choreography that was actually very entrenched in his Khon training. So at the end of the day, there were very technical discussions. And yet again, I am not a technical dance scholar or researcher. I do not have choreographic experience in a formal setting. What did I bring? This is where the idea of the first audience comes in for me. As dramaturg, we read everywhere that we are always also seen, or we remind ourselves and the collaborator, the creator, art maker, that we offer the view of the first audience together with the informed knowledge that we bring to the table. And that was what I offered with my understanding, as little as it was, of the Khon tradition, and then to tap into helping him see, or helping him be the sounding board to talk about it. As much as choreographers love to do, I realized that actually choreographers love to talk. Maybe not in a symposium panel, for sure, but on one-to-one, there is actually a lot of, they try to articulate, and this is the interesting thing for me, where here we are trying to articulate the practice of dramaturgy. Choreographers actually are very keen to articulate their physical practice. Maybe not, like I said again, in this way, but with the right dramaturg, the right sounding board, the right provocateur, I think something could be achieved. And I think that was, for me, the amazing thing, to bridge that link, right? Having said that, I'm going to say very quickly that it was no small feat, because Pichet is actually a very proud and arrogant artist, very sure of himself. But I think in opening up the space for me to discuss, to talk, to argue, to debate with him, I think there was something else that was happening with him. And it was a very, I found it the first time around a good collaboration. And then right after that, not right after, but this was 2010. In 2014, we worked on a new project. And again, it was a development. So yeah, thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you, How Ngean. What I propose is we have 6 speakers. So I'm going to invite 3 dramaturgs to talk about their experience, and I'm going to open it up for Q&A so that the ideas are still fresh, if there's anything specific. And then we'll proceed on to the 3 other speakers, and then we'll do another Q&A then. Yeah. So thank you, How Ngean, for that. So next, I would like to invite Poor Peter doesn't know that he's next. So interrupt him in the middle of his thought to share with us his experience. Peter, please.
Thank you. I was just trying to write my list. So what I'm going to talk about is most of the work I've actually done as a dramaturg has been with one company, Not Yet It's Difficult, which was founded by David Pledger, Paul Jackson and myself in 1995. And over the years I've been, I think, sometimes more and sometimes less involved in the work of that company. And in a way I came to that, the work of a dramaturg. We devised a series of ways of working which were dramaturgical, and then I somehow ended up with the name dramaturg because I was one of the people who was doing that kind of work. But I really must stress that this is a company that I think is committed to a certain kind of dramaturgical vision, and that does not mean that I had any sense of insight into that particular task of dramaturgy. I was simply, I think, somebody who was part of a process, and as much as possible I tried to support that process and to work in helpful ways to advance the vision of that company and of the work of David as the artistic director of that company. We made many works in quite a few different contexts and actually styles of performance. So I was able and encouraged to expand my understanding of what dramaturgy could be as we went along. I became much more, I guess I came to the company with certain skill sets, but I became much more aware of dramaturgy of choreography of bodies, for example. I became much more aware of the relationship between live performance and mediatized spaces. We worked extensively in collaborations with colleagues and partners in the region, so principally one or two projects with Gekinan Kaitaisha in Japan and Wuturi in Korea. The Kaitaisha project I was also centrally involved in as somebody with a particular expertise in the work of that company, and being able to, in some senses, look at some of the bridges that could be built in that working relationship. I guess I became more aware of what a dramaturg does as the company evolved, and certainly the company happened at a time when there wasn't really a conversation about dramaturgy in the Australian theatre. There was one previously, and I think our company was part of an emergent discourse or development of a discussion of dramaturgy once again. I think that the work that we were doing, the work that David did with the company and also with the field, and shaping a generation of new artists and working with other artists, created a certain vocabulary for dramaturgy in Australia that we've, I think, since taken for granted to some extent. We were able to take those experiences into a set of workshops that I undertook with other people called dramaturgies, where we took many of the questions that I had as a dramaturg that I'd confronted with the work with NYID into a dialogue with people coming from different theatre practices, and creating yet another context for dramaturgy, but that's a slightly another story. What are the operational parameters of this? Well, certainly we have a commitment to research. We have a commitment to bringing ideas to from the world to the practice of making performance, and sometimes other forms of artistic production. That's very dramaturgical, and the dramaturg as myself played a role in that, but I played one role alongside many others. I guess I have certain research training that enabled me to do that in a certain kind of way, but in some respects that perhaps limited other kinds of research that other people could bring to the table as well. Academics are trained to do research in a particular way, which doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only kind of research that you can bring to the table. And certainly, I think as a company, we were very alive to notions of collaboration, ideas of practice that could bring a diversity of perspectives to the development of new projects. We also had a commitment to practice, and so as a dramaturg, you're called on to do a number of things, quite practical things sometimes, because as a small to medium company, there's not only a kind of work issue, but there's also an ethic, I think, that I always really enjoyed, of being close to the means of production, not removing yourself too far from the actual mechanics of how work gets made and how it continues to get made. So there's something there, I think, to think about in relation to dramaturgy, and also especially so-called performance dramaturgy, or where you're part of a production process over the long term. I think maybe this is a set of questions around what happens when you work with a company long term as a dramaturg with a stable and visionary artistic team, where very often you share a set of at least aspirational goals to begin with, and then you develop the work over a long time and go to many different places. And sometimes you bring skills and you have fascinations that really do go there in a really important way, and other times other members of the company have that passion and they take the work in that kind of direction, often in very dramaturgical ways as well. I've always thought that one of my important roles was to try and document some of the work and to write about the work, and I've done that to some extent. I've also thought that part of my work has been, in a way, to talk about the work of the company in relation to a broader project of contemporary performance, not only in Australia, but also, very importantly, as a company that operates in relation to other artistic practitioners in the region, and also more broadly across the globe. It's not like we're seeking any kind of global kind of theory here, but we do, I think, have an ethic of collaborating with artists from many different places. It's part of a kind of dramaturgical premise of the company to do that, as not only as artistic practice, but that's also, I think, very important political work that the company has developed. As I said, other people, principally David, have done a lot of dramaturgy in the company and beyond the company. So this is not something that I can speak to in any degree of singularity here. I think it's very much something that is an expanding and opening process. It's been a process of learning and development, and I think it speaks very well to the idea of the dramaturg as somebody who, as another person I often quote, Marianne van Kerkhoven, says, to renegotiate your work every time you begin a production. You don't assume that you know how to do it. So that's where I might leave it. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to Nanako. And then we'll break for some questions, some Q&A. So, Nanako?
Hi again. Yes, thank you for introducing me. So as a case study, I also have another project to talk about today. And then this project is more about the traditional Japanese theater into contemporary dance media performance, and which was done in 2007 when I was living in New York. And regarding practical realities of dramaturgy, I would like to introduce one case study on my dramaturging experience on Kusuja's Mecha Output. That's the title. In relation to the role of dance dramaturg in rehearsals. So Kusuja, she's a postmodern choreographer and Mass Cunningham-trained dancer based in New York. And she asked me to join her in the recreations of her piece, Mecha Output, as dance dramaturg and movement coach. So our collaboration would draw upon my years of training in traditional Japanese dance. So as such, even before rehearsals begin, I practice one dance repertoire of dojoji, which is a primary choreography I was working on with Kusuja. So one of the assignments for my exam in dance had been the dance repertoire of dojoji, which is one of the most significant repertoires in Japanese theater history. So yes, so in addition to my traditional training and background, my work with Kusuja would also be informed by my scholarly or research interest in updating Japanese traditions for the contemporary audience. So we started working together, and we discussed at great lengths how Kusuja planned to revive her renowned choreography for the audience at the New York Japan Society. That's the venue in 2007. And during the rehearsal process, I worked with her to help her read original no text. So there's many versions of dojoji, but her version is based on no text and performance. And also helped to examine how no principles rehearsed movement sequences with her and her musician, and helped organize video footage of no and her past performance, and worked with media artists to assemble the images and game space of dojoji that would be projected during the show. I show a little bit images, movies later. So my function as dramaturg, as dance dramaturg and movement coach for this project also required much thought about the aesthetics of the movement and ethics, the Peter mentions also, of translating a traditional no performance movement vocabulary into her Kusuja's postmodern dance vocabulary. So we needed to foreground the process to render the content in traditional no movement accessible, and we discovered that this challenge could be met by including on stage the perspective of the dramaturg. We also learned that the performers and the dramaturg's perspective could be represented in juxtaposition to each other within the choreography. So I show a little clips for this. これはこうやって。How can I? Yes, and then this one. What? Okay. Not this. This is the beginning of the piece, and then so the stage was somehow formed as a kind of twisted no theater stage in the, how do you say, in a standard theater framework. Yes. So I also explain how we worked during these sequences. So to interpret the form of no, play dojoji, Kusuja brings elements from various sources into the network of her work. So even during the performance, information is transmitted to Kusuja from 20 video monitors placed around the stage. So you can see a little bit monitors around the stage, like a bridge stage, and also to the main stage, there's also the monitors standing around the stage.
Like a modified Hanamichi.
Yes, that's right. But actually, Hashigakari, Hanamichi is for the Kabuki theater. So, but it's so like her interpretation is almost like a combination of Hanamichi and Hashigakari in that way. So Kusuja reviews these informations and translated it into her own movement vocabulary. She wears one piece and high heels, so that's her own way of movement. That's her own kind of costumes. And this piece, no actors performing dojoji are shown on various video monitors on stage. And although these no actors are not physically present, their projected images represent the original source of Kusuja's live performance. As Kusuja watches the no actors, she copies their gestures, and information about the bodily technique of no actors is archived and stored in the videos, and Kusuja incorporates this information into the creation of her own dancing body through an archival process. And this is a practice she has named by herself as live processing. So that's her own kind of approach to this traditional Japanese no technique. So in my conversation with her, and through the work we did, reconstructing movements that were not actually documented in the video, I began to understand this system of learning. So in traditional dance and theater training, there is no inscribable information. The performance tradition is orally taught within one community, passed from a teacher to a chosen student. So this is also the talk that I mentioned in the first session. Yep. It's almost like oral transmissions is kind of secret story. So my task here is to provide a means of access for the people outside of the community. So she is singing in English. So in order to democratize the dojoji of No, focus uses choreography. So in cases where the information about movements was not documented in the video, Kusuja would suggest alternative ideas. However, many of her ideas, such as spinning herself quickly 4 times on the stage, exceeded rules of traditional Japanese theater. So I couldn't think of that kind of ideas by myself, but she suggested that. So those things happened during the process. Maybe I show a little bit clips. So the structure of the piece follows the structure of No theater. So first half and then break, but the break as a kyogen part, but she interprets as her own kind of duet with the bell, duet with the TV monitors. And then the second part comes after the break. So that's a kind of structure stays. So this is the end of the first part when original No performers jumps into the bell, and then the bell falls on the stage. But that in her case, it's TV monitors as a bell. So my functions as a dramaturg, as well as moving coach, required much considerations with regards to the aesthetics and ethics of these movement choices, as they are being translated from a traditional No performer into Kusuja's own vocabulary. So well-trained dancers physically and emotionally internalize the aesthetic practice and discipline of dance. And as a traditional dance teacher by myself, I also have a sensory memory to recognize which movements, either new or adapted, would offend the traditions of the dance. On some occasions, for example, as when Kusuja would take certain steps on stage while wearing her outside shoes with dirt or some kind of showing outside elements on it, I myself would feel offended. So as a result of my training, my body is systematically also close to the possibility of differentiating the personal from the sensations of the movement itself. So this training affords me the confidence to say no to certain choices, certain her attempts at rule breaking. But it also denies me the creative personal freedom that Kusuja chooses. So, given my physical internalizations of the aesthetic practice of the traditional Japanese dance form, our dialogue allowed Kusuja to establish a postmodern reading of the dance, which did not, however, exclude the original no aesthetics. So I kind of maybe I show a little bit the part. How much do we have time? No, 2 minutes. So this is a kind of the free dancing part for her. So this is the break part as a kyogen part in the original no form, but she takes it as a kind of duet. Okay, just wrap up. So my work as dance dramaturg for this project was substantially engaged with the negotiations of culture politics in terms of movement. So this involved internal sensing of the dance experience. When the knowledge of a culture is separated from its origins and democratized, culture reproduction should be critically examined through a negotiator, such as a dance dramaturg. In order to ensure that the boundaries of traditional practice are not merely replaced with the confines of power, whatever that is. For the local people, to democratize the culturally reserved bodily knowledge, such as that of no actors, is to blaspheme the tradition under the globalized colonial power. As previously mentioned, the archived knowledge from the past is partly separated and dissociated from the preceding tradition. For similar reasons, I felt anxious and uncomfortable while working with Kusuja and drawing upon experienced points of conflict and resonance with my own physical internalizations of the aesthetic practice of the traditional Japanese dance form. However, my negotiation as her dance dramaturg during this cultural reproduction reflects precisely a resolve not to exclude the original communal sensibility of no. And I enjoy the process very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Nanako. Right. As scheduled, we're going to open it up to the floor for any questions. Just to kind of do a quick recap, it's really about How Ngean talked to us about negotiating cultural and linguistic differences and being a sounding board and the first audience. Peter talked to us about research, practicalities, and not to be too far removed from the production process, documentation and transmission of that documentation. And of course, Nanako talked to us about the ethics of translation, the aesthetics of translation, and how the dance dramaturg is a very apt negotiator. So, any questions from the floor, please let us know. We'll pass you the mic. Yes, Juliet.
I wonder if you could describe a little bit in more detail, sort of what the result is of the work that, the way, the different examples you've provided, the imprint of that work in the final product that was presented to the audience?
Is there a specific person you're addressing this to?
No, each of you, I guess. Because I think you've described the process a little bit. I'm just curious about if there was what the result of that was.
In the interest of time, I will force you to pick one.
Sure, since you've spoken to me first, why don't we start with you?
Talking about the final product, so to speak, right? Sorry, can you just exactly what are you looking at?
I'm just curious if you could identify a specific conversation that you had that led to a specific outcome, and how that happened. A specific way the final work was shaped due to something that you contributed to the discourse.
Right. This is something that I'm still trying to find my way in terms of the role and function and working as a dramaturg. Is not to actually pinpoint, pick out highlights of my contribution. But what I can say is that the shape of conversations, if you like, the shape of the provocations between Pichet and myself, specifically pertaining to black and white, the work that I just showed, it really does go from the general, from very early stages of rehearsal, it's wide and deep and general also, and then it starts to filter as we get nearer to some kind of performance score or setting the choreography of the piece. Whereas by the time we reached, I think, I would say technical rehearsal, or even dress rehearsal, that's when we would talk specifics right down to a specific scene in a particular setting of the choreography. But before that, it is rather free-flowing, like I said, until it becomes more specific time to the performance. But what it is also is that it's sort of like a reversal. In the beginning, during the process of discovery, experimentation in rehearsal, many times I'm the one prompting the choreographer to ask me questions. That means I want him to ask me questions of what I see so that then we can talk about it. As the process narrows down or filters down to sort of a late stage just before premiere, that's when he will ask me to ask him questions. So it's like to clarify what's happening in the performance. In terms of, again, this contribution thing, for the purpose of this particular case or example I gave, I don't think there's any specific point where there is a material contribution, whereas in general there was an intellectual shape of conversations that led to then the shaping, as it were, of the performance score.
Actually, we do have a bit of time. Nanako, would you like to answer the question about were there any specific points that manifest itself concretely in the final presentation that was a result of, for want of a better word, your intervention as a dramaturg?
Well, I think one of the things that I can think of was maybe not as a piece itself, piece as it is, more about the text that I contributed to as a program note. And I also wrote the text with her, or kind of like I had a dialogue with her when we are rehearsing together how this piece is conceived theoretically as a more kind of democratizations of the traditional Japanese no to the audience at the Japan Society, New York. And then there's a, how do you say, like a conflict, or there's a, the theater doesn't like the idea so much, so that they actually put our text into like a certain kinds of artistic statement, not as more like a descriptions or kind of introduction to the audience, more as a kind of separate. It's separated from what they could expect to put in the program notes also. So it's almost like a conflict is getting probably bigger and bigger, but at the same time, I protect artistic decisions at the same time. Yes, I said no to her, but I also protect Kusuja's decisions and aesthetic individual identities from the institutional power, in a way.
Thank you. Just before I go to that question, just wanted to let those of you who were not here this morning in the close of the session, there was one point made by one of the discussants that the work of the dramaturg is actually invisible, and the outcome itself is invisible. So it really is about supporting. So, but I think what Peter talked about, the ability to document it and to talk about it, is a way of raising a certain kind of visibility to the practice itself. So it doesn't get too completely embedded into the performance, so that we're able to discuss and talk about it. Yeah? So please, question.
Hi, I have two specific questions, one for Ngean and one for Nanako-san. The one for Ngean is, I was listening and feeling very impressed that the Esplanade was the one to facilitate your relationship with Piche, while Esplanade was also the one to commission the new work, and to commission a new work in Singapore and facilitate the participation of the dramaturg who has not been dramaturging worked in as a dramaturg before, so that through this experience with Piche, that I'm pretty sure that you sort of became a dramaturg to one of your slashed identity, the categories. But how did you feel about that at the beginning is also my question. And also, was there, if you aware, was there anybody else who sort of became or nurtured to be a dramaturg in this way in Singapore? I mean, we are talking about adapting the Western idea of the dramaturg as a role in the theater in Asia, and appointing a person when theater is appointing a new commission work is one of the great way to make dramaturg, I felt. And another question to Nanako-san is, it's very personal, out of my personal curiosity. The project looked really amazing, and I think many of, especially the Western theater people, were dying to do that. And yet, like, organization like us, like Japan Foundation, will get like hundreds of requests, like, I want to do a project like that, and can you introduce me a Japanese dancer, who can teach me the movement? We get that every day. And the reason that it's hard is, one, it's a collaboration between artist and artist. And when the traditional side of the artists are not willing to collaborate, then it doesn't happen. And two, when you are in tradition, or if you are interested in collaboration or international work, you sometimes, it means that you are not really too much deep into the tradition. So we don't feel that person is not very qualified to represent the person a certain tradition. So I feel it's very hard, that kind of work to be happening. So my question is, it's very out of my personal curiosity, but how did you become a researcher and dramaturg, being a certified I read your profile in Japanese, but the Fujimaryu teacher, which is not something that you can achieve in a few years, I believe. And I also believe the Fujimaryu, the Nihonbyo, or Japanese traditional dancing, is also sort of functions as a database of the movement for the kabuki theaters and some of the traditional theaters, so that the Japanese traditional dance, the families preserve the knowledge and to transfer that to each performers when they grow up. So do you also consider that traditional, the role of Japanese dance as a Japanese very traditional way of dramaturgy?
So we start with Nanako-san.
Yes.
Do you need time to?
Can you say a little bit the traditional type of dramaturgy? I just didn't understand the last word.
The Nihonbyo, or the Japanese traditional dancers, do you think they were the original form of the dramaturgy,
Traditional form of dramaturgy.
in Japan? Because they function, they advise the kabuki, for my knowledge, the performers, the movement, and then they will function as a database. And then they sometimes advise the new addition to stage set or directions, but yet they are not the performers, or they are not coach either. Yeah.
Okay, I just quickly answer the question. I think you may be right. Like it's of course like it's a kind of basic rules, like basic aesthetics in terms of physical movement, in terms of general theater constellations even. So like I could also talk, or I could also sense that what kind of setting is supposed to be, or what kind of spatial arrangement is supposed to be in terms of movement, or in terms of relations of the moving body to the theatrical space. So maybe but I'm not really sure if I can say it as a traditional dramaturgy. But maybe the kind of sensibilities are inside, and there's something that the people in the traditional Japanese theater get used to it. The kind of system of not proscenium theater, but more like a kind of interactions with actors, dancers, performers in the theater, within the theater space, and that's the constructions of all Nihonbyo and Kabuki no, and that is different from proscenium theater space. And somehow, yes, it makes me think so much about that too. Maybe I need to think more how I can answer the question. But thank you.
How Ngean?
Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to also understand a bit of the question. Let me just answer and see whether I'm hitting it. First of all, when I said that Esplanade has went into engaging me, there was, of course, a prior backstory, quite a long one actually, which I tried to shorten with 12 minutes of presentation. There was interest in Pichet where Esplanade was concerned, and by that time, Esplanade had already, or rather the dance festival section of Esplanade was very cognizant or very aware of the value of dramaturgy and the dramaturg in collaborating, in assisting, serving the new commission servicing. That was a slip of the tongue. And I had heard about, and I have already known Pichet for a while, and like I said, I did embark on my PhD, and I was actually swimming around thinking of a thesis topic to look at. And it was just me, I have to say, being at the right time, the right place. And so when I heard that there was some idea of Esplanade being interested, there was a present move for me to actually contact them and say, I would like to do this. And yes, at that time, there was no idea what I was getting myself into. I had done a smaller project on dance, dramaturgy, and by that time, I had a year of experience, just 1 year of experience working on the Singapore Arts Festival of that time with a board of dramaturgs. So it was still very new to me, but I did, however, tell the producer, who's here, Faith, that at that time, I really don't know enough, but if this works, it'll be great. So we entered into a series of long discussions, and therefore, after that, I was still not sure what was going to happen, because we still had to fly to Bangkok to meet Pichet. I remember that meeting. It was Faith, Pichet, and me. We sat down, and it was a very long chat. It was a very long chat, and even right up to 3-4 hours of talking, when we left, I remember, I think I told Faith, right? I have no idea how that went. What do you think he's thinking? Faith went, I have no idea either. But it came back that Pichet was happy to continue talking. And that was one of the ways that I quickly tapped into unlocking maybe the beginnings of a working relationship, and therefore the idea of the sounding board, the provocateur, even if it leads to some kind of heated debate sometimes. And it's, again, playful. We're talking about playful collaborations. One of the things that he actually did, which I didn't mention, was that whenever we went into discussion and there were some suggestions from me, he had the sneaky or naughty thing of actually always doing the opposite. And he took glee. He took a lot of pride in coming to tell me the next day, oh, I've done it the other way. For me, it was great. Then more questioning happened, and it helped to clarify also his position on why he went totally the opposite way. As to how it feels, I think with every project, for me, it always feels very different, and the learning experiences are different again. But what I do want to impress upon is that there is real value and real value in having a continuing working relationship with a particular artist where you bounce continuously from one project to another until such time that you feel there should be a parting of ways.
Thank you. Just if you have any more questions, if you can hold them on until we've heard from the other three speakers, and we'll open it to the floor. So we're coming back to our panelists right now, and we're going to move on to Yinan, who will share with us her experience.